Why did they laugh at her? The question lingered in the salty air carried on the whispers of young men who believed themselves untouchable. They laughed because they thought they saw weakness. They laughed because arrogance blinds the strong faster than fatigue ever could. And in that ring of muscle and bravado, one figure stood apart, silent, unflinching, and older than all of them. Chief Warrant Officer 5. A rank earned, not given. A life carved out of sand, silence, and impossible distances where mistakes had no second chances. To them, though, she was just a relic, just a paper pusher sent to monitor a training exercise, a grandma on a range where gods believed they were forged. Lieutenant Commander Blackwood, their chosen star, had been the loudest voice in the circle. His words sharp, dripping with sarcasm. "You can hold the spotter scope, Grandma. Try not to drop it." The laughter stung the air, but it did not touch her. The expression never changed. Not a flinch, not a smile, not even a flicker of offense. She reached down, lifted the heavy spotting scope, and set it into place with hands that had steadied rifles across continents. Her movements were too efficient, too exact, too knowing. One man noticed. Master Sergeant, 40 years of war behind his eyes. He watched her feet settle, perfectly balanced. He watched her fingers, not searching but already knowing where to adjust. He saw the way her gaze lingered, not on the men, not on the noise, but on the horizon itself. He had seen shooters before, thousands of them, but there was something different here, something dangerous. And yet the arrogance around her continued to swell. Blackwood raised his voice, lecturing about spin drift and the effect as if unveiling sacred mysteries to disciples. He gestured at the simulated village downrange, his words laced with pride. "This isn't something you learn from a book, ma'am. This takes instinct." The young SEALs nodded, their silence forming a wall of complicity. Their admiration belonged to him, their indifference reserved for her, remained outside their world, as if they were children playing a game while she inhabited a different reality altogether. Inside, she was not standing on dusty range. She was 17 again, belly pressed to stone, the desert sun burning her skin, her father's voice echoing in memory. "Find the space between heartbeats. That's where the shot lives." She could smell the smoke of an ambush. She could hear the crack of RPG fire tearing into American steel. She could taste fear, her own and that of men caught in the kill zone. And she could feel, with every nerve of her being, the pull of a decision she wasn't supposed to make. She had been an observer, not an operator. That was the order. Watch, report, stay hidden. But when 12 enemy fighters descended on a convoy pinned against stone and fire, orders meant nothing. Lieutenant Young, then, bleeding, refusing to surrender, was surrounded. New reinforcements were 20 minutes away. They didn't have 20 minutes. She whispered calculations, distance, wind, drop, pressure. Her mind worked like a machine, but her chest was human, heavy with the weight of choice. She was just 17, yet she pressed her finger to the trigger as though she had been born to that moment. 5 shots. Each one found its mark. The machine gunner, the RPG team, the fighters who exposed themselves for just a fraction too long, and finally, the man in the red scarf, the leader. At 870 yards, her bullet reached him in silence. 1 second of air, 1 second of gravity, 1 second of destiny. And when he fell, the attack unraveled. The survivors fled. The convoy lived. And though no one would believe it, no one would put her name on the report, she had learned the truth that day. The line between observer and operator does not exist when lives hang in the balance. She returned to the present, her eyes narrowing against shimmering heat. The young men laughed again. Blackwood smirked, and she did nothing. Because silence, she had learned, was stronger than retorts. Silence was where power lived. But silence does not mean absence. Master Sergeant approached, his voice steady, carrying a weight the young operators could not yet understand. "Chief Warrant Officer, an honor to have you on the range today." Blackwood stiffened, annoyance cutting through his mask of confidence, but wasn't speaking to him anymore. His eyes stayed on her. You served with Task Force 88, didn't you, ma'am? Afghanistan. The world shifted in an instant. The laughter died. The name fell into the air like stone into still water. Task Force 88 on paper, whispered in shadows. Only ghosts had served there. His answer was quiet, even, but unmistakable. It was a long time ago, Master Sergeant. Not that long, replied, his eyes locked with hers. I believe we crossed paths in the Hindu Kush. Silence deepened. The weight of memory pressed in. Blackwood faltered, confusion creeping into his posture. The men glanced at one another, their certainty dissolving like mist in sun. A woman they had mocked was suddenly revealed as someone their world had only ever hinted at. Did not smile. She did not boast. She only asked one question, her voice calm, her gaze steady. Would you prefer I continue observing, Lieutenant Commander, or would you like me to take a more active role in today's exercise? Her words carried no arrogance, only certainty. And in that moment, though they did not yet know it, everything began to change. Because legends do not announce themselves. They wait in silence, they endure the scorn, and when the time comes, they act. But there was something else, something she hadn't told them, not yet, something buried deep in her father's teachings, in missions never recorded, in scars no one could see. Something that would make this training ground more than a test, something that would turn into a crucible of truth. And as the wind shifted across the range, whispering secrets only she could hear, knew one thing with absolute clarity. They thought God wasn't on their side. They hadn't met her yet. What if the past refused to stay buried? That question haunted as she stepped away from the firing line. The sun burned down, relentless, but it wasn't the heat that weighed on her. It was the looks, the sudden silence of men who had once mocked her. Their arrogance had cracked just slightly, but cracks were enough. In those fractures, doubt lived. Respect, too, if it was earned the hard way. Blackwood tried to mask it with bravado. He shifted his weight, cleared his throat, raised his voice. But even in his words could hear something breaking. Master Sergeant, he began stiffly, with all due respect, we are in the middle of a briefing. Didn't let him finish. His voice carried more weight than rank. Begging your pardon, sir, but I believe Chief has insights worth hearing. After all, she designed this scenario. The young SEALs froze. Their expressions flickered, confusion, disbelief, a hint of fear. The ghost scenario. Every candidate whispered about it in hallways and chow lines. It was notorious, unsolvable, designed to break the best. They had always been told it came from a group sniper instructor, a man. But now the truth cut through them like a blade. The woman they dismissed as a bureaucrat was the architect of their nightmare. Blackwood's smirk faltered, his jaw clenched. That can't be right, he muttered, his words brittle. But even as he said it, the name hung between them like smoke. The scenario bore her mark. His eyes sharpened. Her silence was heavier than any lecture. And then, softly, she broke it. Would you like me to take a more active role, Lieutenant Commander? For a moment, no one moved. The range was alive with sound, the whisper of wind, the distant clatter of metal targets in the breeze, but the men heard only her words. Blackwood's pride fought to hold ground. We'll continue as planned, he said, his voice hard but thin. Yet something in his stance betrayed him. He knew, even if he wouldn't admit it, the balance of power had shifted. And felt the weight of memory pressing in again, the Hindu Kush. Darkness before dawn, mountains rising like jagged teeth against the sky. She lay prone on a rocky outcrop, her M4A3 steady against her shoulder. The SEALs below moved like shadows, 7 men crossing into a valley that had swallowed empires. Their objective, a Taliban command post buried within a village. She wasn't supposed to be there. Officially, she was a technical advisor. Women weren't permitted in direct combat roles, but Colonel Richardson had insisted. He knew her capabilities. He knew the unspoken truth. When the math became impossible, when the conditions broke, men trained to the edge of perfection could still make the shot. Through her night scope, she saw what the SEALs could not. Fighters hidden in the rocks, machine guns disguised as rubble, RPG teams tucked into shadows, 30 men waiting for the Americans to step into the killing zone. "Jesus Christ," her spotter whispered. "It's a trap, we need to warn them." She tried. The radio crackled with static. The enemy was jamming their comms. Her heart pounded, but her voice was calm. "We changed the equation." She squeezed the trigger. Her first shot split the commander's skull before his body even hit the floor. The second tore through the comms operator. Then methodically, without panic, she cut down RPG gunners' machine teams, positions no one else had even spotted. Each shot was a new calculation: wind shear, barometric pressure, the very pull of the Earth itself. At 2,200 meters, the effect wasn't a theory, it was a law. She had to feel the bullet's journey across an invisible map of shifting currents. 12 shots, 12 kills. By the time the SEALs entered the village, the survivors had fled, certain they were facing a battalion, not a single woman on a distant ridge. Later, when Lieutenant Commander Harrison asked who had saved them, the answer was simple, almost dismissive. "Overwatch reports all clear. Ghost 7. That name followed her for years. Ghost 7. A whisper, a shadow, a myth, never acknowledged, never official, but alive in every operator who'd survived because of her. And now, the past brushed against the present. She felt it in the way had looked at her, in the silence of the young men who realized the ghost in their legends was standing beside them. But legends carried burdens, and hers was heavy. When Afghanistan ended, she was reassigned. Not to combat, not to operations, but to instruction. Fort Benning, the sniper school, a cage made of accolades, prestigious but limiting. She taught men who didn't want her there. She improved programs that resisted her touch. And she endured because that was what she had always done. She remembered the faces clearly. The captain who sneered in staff meetings. "No offense, Chief, but there's a reason women don't belong in combat." The colleagues who dismissed her victories as anomalies. She never raised her voice. She let the results speak. The marksmanship competition had been her answer. 10 shots at a moving target 1,200 yards with shifting winds. Mitchell, a decorated Marine, had scored high. The crowd had cheered him. Then she stepped forward. 10 shots, 10 perfect strikes. History made in silence. The room hadn't cheered her. Not at first. But respect doesn't always sound like applause. Sometimes it sounds like silence breaking into uneasy awe. And even Mitchell, red-faced and begrudging, had whispered, "That was impressive." But respect is fleeting, and cages, no matter how gilded, still confine. That was when she heard the word for the first time. Valkyrie, a program buried in Cold War shadows, a program whispered in her father's journals, a program meant for women like her, snipers where men would stand out, ghosts trained to weaponize silence. She had thought it was long gone, but the word lingered, a shadow in her memory. And as Blackwood struggled to hold his pride together, she felt it stir again. Because the ghosts of the past never die quietly. Adjusted her stance, her eyes scanning the target's downrange. She breathed in steady. The wind shifted against her cheek, carrying with it the smell of salt and heat. She wasn't here to prove herself, not anymore. She had nothing left to prove. But she was here to remind them what silence could do. And as she lowered her cheek against the rifle stock, her father's words returned once more. The shooter is not the weapon. The shooter is the wind, the earth, the pause between heartbeats. Blackwood didn't know it yet. None of them did. But the moment was coming when every illusion would break, when the arrogance would burn away, and when the last Valkyrie would show them what it meant to fight alone. Not for pride, not for recognition, but because when silence becomes action, lives are saved. Why had she stayed silent for so long? The question rose in his mind as she broke down her rifle, piece by piece, her hands steady, her expression calm. Silence had been her shield. Silence had been her weapon, but silence could also become a prison. On the air shifted. The seals were no longer laughing. They weren't even speaking. Respect was beginning to take root, but it was fragile, shallow, still tangled with disbelief. And disbelief had a way of festering. Colonel arrived. His presence was gravity itself, calm, heavy, impossible to ignore. He surveyed the scene, his eyes passing over the failed sniper teams, over Blackwood's clenched jaw, and finally settling on. He didn't waste words. "Chief, feel like showing these boys how the old guard gets it done." She gave a single nod. Not for them, not even for him, but because sometimes the only answer to arrogance is demonstration. The range grew still. Blackwood crossed his arms, a smirk twitching at his lips. The wind howled, mocking, violent, unpredictable. Making one shot at that distance was near impossible. To him, her failure was inevitable. But didn't move toward their carbon fiber rifles with their digital readouts and sleek attachments. She walked to an old case no one had noticed. She opened it slowly, reverently, and lifted out an M210 enhanced sniper rifle. Heavy, outdated, considered obsolete. But in her hands it was something else. She assembled it with the rhythm of muscle memory, each piece finding its home as though rifle and shooter had been born for each other. No wasted motion, no hesitation, no reliance on gadgets. She plucked a blade of dry grass, let it fall, primitive, yet infinitely more honest than the machines the others. Her cheek met the stock. Her breathing slowed. The world narrowed to a single line between herself and the village target array downrange. Blackwood waited for failure. The others waited for proof. And then it came. 7 shots, fired so quickly, so seamlessly, they sounded like one tearing breath in the fabric of the air. Thump, 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 thump. Silence. Then, like a chorus from another world, the distant metallic ring of impacts. Tink, 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 tink. The village dissolved. Targets that had mocked the seals for days crumbled in seconds. The high-value target, his guards, a hidden sniper no one had even seen, a driver behind glass, a comms antenna, even a simulated explosive charge that detonated in red smoke. In less than 3 seconds, an entire enemy command unit ceased to exist. The silence on the range was crushing. Blackwood's face fell slack, disbelief painting him hollow. "No," he whispered, "that's not possible. Nobody can read wind like that. Nobody." But someone could. Someone just had. Colonel stepped forward, his boots crunching gravel, his expression unreadable but his eyes sharp. He placed a heavy hand on Blackwood's shoulder. His voice, low and deliberate, carried the weight of final judgment. "Lieutenant, you're about to learn a very important lesson about assumptions." He turned, gestured toward an aide. "Ensign, pull up Chief's file, read it. Unclassified portions only." The young officer's hands trembled as he scrolled. His voice cracked at first, then grew steady, stronger, incredulous. "Name, rank, Chief Warrant Officer 5. Unit classified, formerly attached to Joint Special Operations Command Task Force," he swallowed. "Combat deployments, 17. Combat hours, over 4,000. Awards, the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars with Valor Device Distinguished Service Cross." The SEALs shifted uneasily. Their arrogance drained away, replaced with something heavier. Awe, shame. The ensign's voice wavered on the last line. "She holds the standing record for the longest confirmed kinetic strike in a combat zone. Distance, classified." The words settled over them like dust after an explosion. Crushing, irrefutable. Colonel let silence do the teaching. Then finally he said the truth aloud. "Lieutenant, the reason you failed this course is simple. Chief designed it. She wrote the book you've been trying to memorize." Blackwood's mouth opened, but no words came. His certainty was gone. His pride lay broken at his boots. And then the colonel did something that would etch itself into every witness's memory. He turned, faced, and raised his hand in salute, not the perfunctory gesture of rank, not the crisp acknowledgement of chain of command, but the deep, reverent salute reserved for legends. "Ma'am," he said, his voice thick, "my apologies for the ignorance displayed here today." Followed, then one by one the SEALs raised their hands, a chain of humility snapping into place. They weren't saluting an administrator anymore. They were saluting a ghost. That night the story spread like wildfire. In barracks, in bars, in whispers across fire bases. The ghost of the woman who had outshot an entire sniper class with an old rifle, dismantling arrogance in seconds. And within hours, a new phrase was born in the Special Operations lexicon. Don't get. It meant don't underestimate, don't assume, don't let arrogance blind you. But for the legend wasn't vindication. Legends meant stories, stories meant eyes, eyes meant exposure. And exposure, she knew, was dangerous. Because some shadows never truly fade. Why did he come back the next morning? That was first thought when she saw Lieutenant Commander Blackwood standing outside her office at 4:45. His uniform was pressed to perfection, his posture rigid, but the arrogance that had once radiated from him was gone. In its place was something unfamiliar: humility. When she stepped into the dawn air, he snapped to attention. No smirk, no sarcasm, just a clean, formal apology for his words, for his attitude, for his lack of respect. And then the part she hadn't expected, he asked to learn. Studied him in silence, searching his face for the remnants of pride. There were still shadows of it, but they were subdued, tempered by shame. She gave a single nod. Be on the range at 5:30, bring your rifle, and be ready to listen to the wind. His relief was visible though restrained. He gave a sharp nod in return. Yes, Chief. But when he arrived at the range, she him his rifle. Instead, she handed him a blindfold. He frowned, with all due respect. Trust me, she interrupted, her voice flat. Yesterday, you failed because you trusted your equipment more than yourself. Today, you'll learn the difference. She tied the cloth around his eyes. Then, for 2 hours, she forced him to stand blindfolded in the wind, listening, feeling, failing, and slowly, painfully, beginning to understand. At first, his answers were clumsy. The wind from the west, temperatures rising. Too easy, too shallow, she pushed harder. What does it sound like through the grass? Through the nylon of your uniform? What does your skin tell you before your ears can? Gradually, something shifted. He began to notice the subtle distinctions. The way air moved differently over water versus stone, how pressure pressed against his cheek before the gust fully arrived, how sound carried secrets if you listened long enough. When she finally removed the blindfold, the sun was high, and Blackwood's face carried the strain of someone who had been forced to rethink everything. He looked at the range as though it had become something new, alive, speaking a language he was only beginning to hear. Handed him a canteen. The kestrel is a tool, a good one, but it only tells you the wind in one spot. A bullet travels through 1,000. She tapped her temple. Your instincts, that's the only computer you'll ever trust completely. Blackwood nodded, the first trace of respect softening his hardened features. My father used to say something similar, about hunting, said you had to feel the woods, not just see them. Paused. Your father? Vietnam, 3rd Marines, died last year. His voice carried weight, regret, and a quiet pride. She studied him, her tone softening just slightly. I'm sorry for your loss. Blackwood lowered his gaze. He wouldn't have made the mistakes I made yesterday. No, she admitted, he probably wouldn't have, but he had to learn once too. For the first time she saw it. Not arrogance, not bravado, but potential. Something worth shaping. Same time tomorrow, she said. Bring your rifle. We'll see if you can apply what you've started to learn. As she walked away, Blackwood called after her. Chief, thank you. She didn't turn. "Don't thank me yet, Lieutenant, we've barely begun." Word spread quickly. Blackwood was not the only one who came to her. Within days, others joined, first a handful, then a dozen, then nearly 20. Snipers who had once laughed now stood in silence, waiting for instruction. Didn't seek followers, she didn't want disciples, but she didn't turn them away. She simply taught wind, terrain, silence. Lessons no textbook could capture, only years of scars could. She pushed them hard, harder than they expected. She broke them down, not with insults but with silence, with questions that forced them to confront their own limits. And when they faltered, she didn't humiliate them. She showed them, quietly, patiently, until respect was no longer grudging, it was genuine. Even Blackwood, once her loudest critic, became her most diligent student. And that was what drew Captain Frank Mitchell out of the shadows. He arrived one morning, his face drawn tight, his eyes sharp with resentment. He had once faced her in competition and lost. He had carried the sting of it ever since. Now he wore the uniform of a liaison officer, but his presence was heavier than that. "You're up early," said her tone neutral. Mitchell's jaw tightened. "Couldn't sleep. Heard there was a circus out here." "Just training," she replied. "Training?" He stepped closer, his voice rising. "That's what you're calling it. I call it disruption. Undermining established protocols, creating confusion in the pipeline." Kept her hands steady, continuing to arrange equipment. "If improving scores is disruption, then I'm guilty." "This isn't about scores." His tone sharpened. "This is about you trying to prove something again, just like at Bennying." She turned, facing him fully now. "What's your real issue with me, Captain?" Mitchell's laugh was harsh, bitter. "My issue? You're dangerous. Not because you shoot better than most men, plenty of people shoot well. You're dangerous because you make people believe exceptions should be the rule." For a moment, silence. Then's eyes hardened. "I've never lowered standards, ever. I've only demanded they be applied equally." "And when the next woman fails but points to you as proof, what then?" His voice was almost a snarl. "You don't belong, you never did. You're playing a game with men's lives." Didn't flinch, she didn't raise her voice. She simply asked, quiet but cutting, "This is about Kandahar, isn't it?" A muscle in Mitchell's jaw twitched. "You lost men," she continued. "Your commander blamed equipment, but it wasn't equipment, it was arrogance. I read the report, I know." For a moment the fight left him. His face paled, but pride is hard to kill. He straightened, forced his mask back on. "You don't know me, and you don't belong here." Before she could respond, another voice cut in. "The only one who doesn't belong here is you, Captain." Blackwood stepped from the shadows, his voice cold, his rifle slung but ready. He moved to side deliberately, a visible act of loyalty. Mitchell sneered. "Careful, Blackwood, you're betting your career on the wrong horse." "I'm betting my career on becoming the best operator I can be," Blackwood shot back. "And right now, that means learning from her." The standoff hung in the air, tense, sharp as a trigger pull. Finally, Mitchell turned, disgust curling his lip. He stalked away into the dawn. Exhaled slowly, watching him disappear. "I didn't need your help," she said quietly. "I know," Blackwood replied. "That's not why I stepped in. What he said, it was wrong. Someone had to say so." For a moment she studied him, and then unexpectedly her voice softened. "Your father would be proud." Blackwood's eyes flickered. He gave a small nod. "I hope so." Then, like always, she shifted back to business. Now, time to learn about shooting in the dark. That night the range came alive under starlight. Thermal targets glowed through night vision optics. The wind whispered harder, colder, less forgiving. She pushed them to exhaustion, forcing them to see beyond numbers, beyond gadgets, beyond pride. By dawn, they were drained but changed. Their world had grown larger, heavier, and more real. But knew something else was stirring. She felt it in the way Colonel watched her, in the way a silver-haired civilian appeared at the range, asking careful questions. The Department of Defense was listening. They wanted her knowledge, they wanted her program, they wanted her name. And that was dangerous. Because the louder her legend grew, the closer the shadows came. Shadows from another time. Shadows that whispered a single word. Valkyrie. What did they really want from her? That was the question couldn't shake as she sat in the sterile briefing room, the walls humming faintly with fluorescent lights, the air too cold, too still. Across the table sat 3 men in suits, their badges discreet but unmistakable. Defense Intelligence Agency. Their smiles polite, their questions sharp. "Chief," one began, his voice smooth, too measured. "We've been monitoring your progress here at. Training scores have improved by 28% under your oversight. Morale is stabilizing. Even Lieutenant Commander Blackwood's evaluations show marked improvement." Said nothing, silence was its own answer. The second leaned forward. "We're here because your methods intrigue us. You're achieving results where others haven't. We believe your approach could be scaled, applied, formalized into a program." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You mean weaponized?" The third man gave a small smile. "Everything in this building is a weapon, Chief, you included." The words carried a chill. Didn't flinch, but inside something stirred. She'd heard this tone before. Recruitment dressed as opportunity. Control disguised as recognition. She remembered another room. Another table, years ago. Afghanistan still burning, the war still unwinnable, and a colonel sliding a folder across to her. The cover stamped with one word: Valkyrie. A program no one admitted existed. Born in the ashes of the Cold War. Designed for women like her, operators who could move where men would draw attention, who could disappear in crowds, who could kill silently and leave legends in their wake. She had refused then. Too young, too wary, too unwilling to surrender her identity to a ghost story. But ghosts never died. They lingered, waiting. The first man cleared his throat. "You've heard of Valkyrie, Chief. We know you have." Her chest tightened, but she kept her voice even. "That program was buried years ago." The second's eyes glinted. "Buried isn't dead. Not when we have the kind of enemies we're facing now. Russia's private military networks are expanding. Splinter groups, contractors with no flag, no rules, and one name keeps surfacing." The name cracked the air like a gunshot. His pulse quickened. She had heard it before. Major X, a sniper whose reputation in the Caucasus matched hers in whispers. The man who had trained insurgents in Syria, mercenaries in Libya, warlords in Ukraine. The man who believed chaos was a currency. "We have intelligence," the third man continued, sliding a dossier toward her. "Has assembled a unit, not conscripts, not thugs, professionals, ex-special forces from half a dozen nations. Their mission, destabilize American interests in the Horn of Africa. They're calling it the Black Fang Company." Open the file. Grainy satellite photos, faces marked with red circles. In the center, eyes cold, mouth set in a permanent sneer. "He's good," the first man said. "Too good. Conventional forces have tried, failed. Even drone strikes haven't touched him, and now he's training women, snipers, operatives. He calls them his daughters." The word lodged like a stone in his chest. Daughters. "He's building his own Valkyrie," the second man said quietly. "And if he succeeds, he'll unleash them across every battlefield where America bleeds." Silence heavy, unyielding. Finally spoke, "And you want me to stop him?" The third leaned back, folding his hands. "We want you to teach others how to stop him, but if it came to it," he paused, "there's no one else we'd trust to face him directly." Her fingers brushed the edge of the dossier. His face stared back, unblinking. For years she had tried to live in silence, to let legends fade, to find meaning in teaching instead of fighting. But the past had a way of calling her back. And this time, the call came with a name. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat alone in her quarters, the dim light casting long shadows across the walls. Her rifle lay disassembled on the table, each piece clean, precise, waiting. Her hands moved over the metal, but her mind drifted elsewhere. To her father, to his voice on the ridges of Montana, teaching her to listen to the wind. To Afghanistan, where her silence had saved lives. To Fort Benning, where arrogance had tried to cage her. To where young men had mocked her until silence shattered them. And to Valkyrie, the word she had tried to forget. Was she one of them, whether she admitted it or not? A daughter of silence, a weapon forged not in glory but in restraint. Her chest ached with the weight of it. She wanted to believe she was more than that. She wanted to believe she could simply teach, simply guide, simply fade. But then she remembered the photo's face, his daughter's. She closed her eyes. In the darkness she saw him, a ghost from another battlefield, a mirror image twisted, corrupted, a man who believed the same truths she did but wielded them for chaos. If he wasn't stopped, others would suffer. Families would mourn. Young men would die in deserts and jungles, never knowing who had taken them. Exhaled slowly, the decision was already made. Silence could not stay silent forever. The next morning, Blackwood found her on the range, already prone, already firing. He approached carefully, respectful, almost hesitant. "You're up early." She didn't look at him. The wind doesn't sleep. He lay beside her, rifle cradled, mimicking her posture. He waited for correction, for guidance. But she gave none. Only after several minutes did she speak. "You think you're ready?" Blackwood hesitated. "For what?" "To miss," she said softly. "To fail, to break. Because that's what's coming if you stay with me." He swallowed. "Then I'll fail, I'll break, and I'll learn." She turned her head, studied him. There was no arrogance left, only resolve. "Good," she said finally. "Because this isn't about me teaching you how to shoot. It's about me teaching you how to survive what's coming." "What is coming?" he asked. Her gaze returned to the horizon. "A man named, and he won't hesitate to kill every one of you." Blackwood's expression hardened. "Then teach me how to kill him first." His lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she chambered a round, inhaled, and let the shot fly. The distant target shattered. Finally, she whispered, almost to herself, "This isn't about killing. It's about making sure silence belongs to us, not him." That night, Colonel called her in. His face was drawn, his tone grave. Orders came down. They want a test run, a live exercise, West Africa, Black Fang territory, limited deployment. You'll lead. Froze lead. You'll take a team, hand-picked, limited footprint. Intel, overwatch, surgical engagement if necessary. Objective confirms presence. Gauge his operation. Her chest tightened. "And if we confirm?" Met her eyes. "Then it's war, quiet, off the books, but war all the same." The room grew heavy, felt the weight of the decision pressing down. She had trained, she had guided, she had tried to stay in the shadows, but shadows were calling her back. Voice softened. "You don't have to say yes, you've done more than enough." But she already knew the truth. Silence had carried her this far. Silence had saved lives, and silence, when necessary, had killed. She rose slowly, her voice steady, resolute. "I'll go." Nodded, then God help, because God's not on his side. Why did the jungle sound so alive at night? That was the thought running through his mind as she crouched beneath the twisted canopy, her rifle balanced across her knees. Crickets screamed in the darkness, frogs croaked in the low marshes, and somewhere deeper, a distant animal growled. The air was thick, wet, and heavy with the smell of earth and rot. But beneath all of that, the jungle was listening. She could feel it. Every branch, every rustle, every misplaced step carried farther than it should. And in that suffocating silence between sounds, she knew they weren't alone. Her team moved with precision. Blackwood to her left, scanning with his optic. Two other operators behind, steady, disciplined, every movement controlled. They had rehearsed this insertion for weeks, but rehearsals in California couldn't capture the way this place breathed. West Africa wasn't forgiving. The heat sapped strength. The insects crawled into every seam of clothing. The ground shifted from clay to mud without warning. It was a place that swallowed arrogance whole. And somewhere ahead, men were waiting. The intelligence had been sparse but clear. The Black Fang Company had set up camp near an abandoned mining town. On paper, mercenaries. In practice, something far more dangerous: operators trained in silence, shadow, patience. Daughters. Halted, raising her fist. The team froze instantly. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing into the dark. There it was, a rhythm, too steady to be natural, too deliberate, breathing. She whispered into comms, 2 o'clock, 30 meters, tree line. Blackwood's rifle angled without hesitation. He breathed out slowly, the way she had taught him. A shape moved in the brush, faint but distinct. But placed a hand on his barrel, lowering it. Wait. Another shape appeared, then another. Silent, disciplined, patient. Their weapons glinted faintly in the starlight. Scouts, and they weren't moving randomly. They were herding, trying to push team into a channel of ground they had likely mined or flanked. His pulse steadied. This was the game, the duel before the duel. She whispered again, "They're probing, stay low, we move left slow." Her team obeyed. Inch by inch, they shifted along the slope, using brush for cover. The enemy patrol passed within 20 meters, never spotting them. Ghosts in the jungle, passing like ships in the night. Only when the last shadow disappeared did Blackwood exhale. "They're trained," he murmured. Nodded, not just trained, conditioned. His hand is all over them. She didn't say the rest aloud. They reminded her of herself. Hours later, they reached the outskirts of the mining town. Rusted machinery leaned like skeletons against the moonlight. Shacks of corrugated metal sagged inward, roofs collapsing under years of rain. The air smelled of oil and damp stone. Through her scope saw them. Black Fang mercenaries, moving in silence, setting tripwires, carrying gear with military precision. Not drunken thugs, not sloppy warlords, professionals. And among them, women. Young, lean, eyes hard. Daughters. Each carried a sniper rifle slung with practiced ease. Each moved with the quiet grace of predators. Blackwood muttered, "Jesus, it's like they're copies." His chest tightened. He was right, the stance, the awareness, even the way they scanned their environment, hadn't just trained them, he'd patterned them, molded them in his image of her. Her comm crackled softly, voice distant but steady. "Overwatch, this is command, confirm visual." Clicked her mic once, confirm. "Do not engage," ordered. "Repeat, do not engage, we only need confirmation." Her finger hovered near her trigger, eyes locked on its lieutenants. She wanted to fire, to end the threat before it spread further, but orders were orders. And then, movement at the far edge of the camp. A tall figure stepped into the open. Broad shoulders, cold eyes, moving with deliberate calm like a man who feared nothing in the world. Even through her scope felt it, the weight of him, the way the others shifted subtly around him like planets around a sun. He crouched near one of his daughters, adjusted her grip, whispered something only she could hear. She nodded, corrected instantly. His chest burned. It was the same way her father had once corrected her, the same quiet confidence, the same ritual of passing knowledge. But here it was twisted, perverted, a mirror image of what she had lived. Voice returned sharp. "Overwatch, confirm ID." Exhaled slowly. Visual confirmed on sight, daughters present. Copy, pull out, repeat, pull out, we've seen enough. But before she could move, stopped. His head tilted, eyes lifting. He stared directly toward her position. Her pulse froze. He couldn't see her. The distance was too far, the concealment too perfect. And yet his gaze was steady, unwavering, as if he knew. Through her scope, their eyes met. two ghosts, two mirrors, across a chasm of jungle and silence. And then slowly smiled. His breath caught. He raised a single finger to his lips. A gesture of silence. Then he turned away, calm, unhurried, as though he had all the time in the world. The message was clear. He knew she was there. He wanted her to know he knew, and he wasn't afraid. Not of her, not of anyone. The exfiltration was brutal. The jungle seemed alive with unseen eyes. Every branch felt like a rifle barrel, every rustle like a footstep. They moved fast but silent, their nerves stretched taut as wire. Blackwood kept glancing at her. "He saw you," he whispered finally. Didn't answer, not at first. She just kept moving one step at a time, her mind replaying that smile, that gesture, that certainty. When they finally reached the extraction point and the rotor wash of the helicopter hit them, she spoke just once, her voice low, certain, unyielding. "He knows me." Blackwood frowned. "Knows you how?" Her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon as the helicopter lifted into the night. "Because he's not building his daughters from scratch," she said. "He's building them from me." Back at base, the debrief was clinical. Satellite images confirms presence. Intel officers debated timelines, sanctions, covert operations, pressed for limited strikes. The DIA pushed for patience. Politics tangled in the air. But sat silent. The image of Smile lingered like a scar. In her quarters, she replayed the encounter in her mind. The tilt of his head, the precision of his movements, the way his daughters mirrored her. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It wasn't just about strategy or geopolitics. It was personal. Wasn't challenging America, he was challenging her. And for the first time in years, felt something she thought she had buried forever. Not fear, not anger. Purpose. Why did the air feel heavier before a fight? That thought gnawed at as she lay prone at the jungle's edge, her rifle pressed against her shoulder, her cheek steady on the stock. The morning mist clung to the trees, muffling sound, turning every shadow into a secret. She could feel her heart slow, beating in rhythm with the weight of silence. The operation had shifted overnight. Orders were no longer to observe. Now they were to disrupt. Hit a Black Fang supply convoy, capture intel, and withdraw before could respond. Clean, surgical, a message, nothing more. But knew better. Nothing about was clean. Nothing about him was surgical. He thrived in chaos. Blackwood lay beside her, scanning through his optic. His voice was barely a whisper. Convoy in sight, 6 vehicles, technicals, rear gun truck, looks like crates, ammo maybe. Adjusted her scope. The mercenaries moved with discipline, not warlords, not bandits, soldiers. Each with eyes sharp, steps precise, weapons held as though extensions of their arms. Her pulse slowed further. The distance, the wind, the terrain, it was all there in her mind, unfolding like an equation she had solved 1,000 times. She could take the shot. She could end the lead driver, stall the convoy, unravel their formation. But she hesitated. Because among the soldiers she saw them again, the daughters. Young women, lean and sharp, rifles slung, eyes constantly scanning. Their movements weren't just disciplined, they were familiar. The stance, the patience, even the way one adjusted her sling before crouching, had done that same adjustment countless times. It was like watching ghosts of herself. Her stomach tightened. She had killed men her whole life. Men who chose this path, men who accepted its cost. But these girls, they hadn't chosen to become weapons. He had carved them into it. And yet they carried rifles. They carried silence. They were predators now. "Chief," Blackwood's voice cut through her thoughts. "Orders." She inhaled slowly, exhaled. "We stall them at the choke point. Take the driver, the gunner, and the comms fast, clean." He nodded, settling into his sights. The convoy reached the narrow bend in the road, flanked by steep earth walls on either side. The perfect trap. Whispered, "On my mark, 3, 2, 1." Her shot broke the silence. The lead driver slumped, the truck swerving to a halt. Blackwood's round snapped into the comms operator, cutting the radio. A third shot from one of her men dropped the gunner in the rear truck before he could swing the weapon. Chaos erupted. Soldiers scrambled for cover, shouting orders. But it was too late. The kill zone was theirs. Shifted targets, firing with calm precision. Each pull of the trigger was deliberate, not rushed. Her bullets carved holes into his formation, dismantling it piece by piece. But then, movement. One of the daughters dropped prone, her rifle snapping to position with speed and grace that made his chest clench. Through her scope, she saw the girl's cheek settle against the stock, her breathing slow, her eyes sharp. A mirror. The shot cracked. The round whistled past its position, close enough to spit earth into her cheek. Blackwood cursed, shifting. Sniper, 11 o'clock. His heart steadied. This wasn't random fire, this was skill. She whispered almost to herself, he's taught them well. The girl fired again, this time closer, deliberate, testing range, wind, adjustment, exactly as wood. Blackwood lined her up. I've got her. His hand shot out, pressing his barrel down. No. He snapped his head toward her, confused, angry. She's going to kill us. I'll handle her, said quietly. Their eyes locked. Blackwood saw something in her expression, something he couldn't name. He gave a sharp nod, then shifted focus to cover the flanks. Steadied her rifle. She exhaled, emptying herself. Through the scope, she saw the girl, calm, precise, waiting for her moment. Their eyes met across the distance. It wasn't arrogance in the girl's stare. It wasn't rage, it was focus. It was silence. Whispered, barely audible, you don't have to do this. The girl fired. Shifted a fraction, the round slicing air beside her. Her own finger squeezed the trigger. Her bullet struck, ripping into the girl's shoulder, spinning her sideways. Not fatal, not final, but enough to end the duel. The girl collapsed, rifle clattering into the dirt. Two other mercenaries dragged her back behind cover, their shouts fading into the chaos. His chest ached. She could kill, she had killed, but not this one, not yet. Because she needed answers. The firefight pressed on. Explosions from planted charges tore through two vehicles. Mercenaries fled into the tree line, their formation shredded. The convoy was broken, smoldering in the heat. Objective secure, Blackwood said, breath ragged. We've got the crates. But's eyes stayed fixed on the spot where the girl had fallen. She could still see her face, pale with shock, young and fierce, blood soaking into her sleeve. It felt like looking into a past she couldn't escape. There was tense. The jungle swallowed sound again, leaving only the steady rhythm of their boots in the mud. But's mind was elsewhere, on the girl, on the smile he had given her days before. Back at the voice came sharp through comms. Mission success. Intel confirms the crates held encrypted SATCOM units. We've bought ourselves time. Well done. The team exhaled, relief mixing with exhaustion, but stayed silent. Blackwood noticed, Chief, you're not celebrating. She shook her head, we didn't win. His brow furrowed, we destroyed their convoy. No, her voice was low, certain. We exposed ourselves, that's what wanted. He wanted to see us, to test us, and now he knows. Blackwood swallowed hard, knows what? Met his eyes, that I'm still out here, that I'll face him. She leaned back against the wall, exhaustion heavy in her bones. And next time, he won't send his daughters to test me. He'll come himself. That night, alone in her bunk, closed her eyes and tried to sleep. But all she saw was the girl, the steadiness of her hands, the clarity of her eyes, the way silence had lived in her like a second soul. And in the darkness, whispered the truth aloud. She's me, he's made her me. The thought was heavier than any bullet, because killing was one thing. But killing her own reflection, that was something else entirely. Why did silence always come before the storm? That thought echoed in his mind as the Black Fang camp came into view. The final objective, its heart of operations. An old radio tower squatted in the center, its steel frame rusting but still alive with antennas and cables. Around it, mercenaries moved with precision, patrols layered, defenses woven like a net. And among them she saw her again, the girl from the convoy, shoulder bandaged, face pale but still carrying her rifle, still sharp, still unbroken. Had kept her close. His chest tightened. She had chosen not to kill her once. That decision had followed her every night since, and now it felt like fate was demanding an answer. "Positions," she whispered into comms. Her team spread out across the ridge, rifles nesting into dirt. Blackwood lay at her side, jaw set, breathing slow. He was ready, steady in a way he hadn't been weeks ago. He was hers now, not her soldier, but her student. Through her scope searched, and then she found him. Standing at the base of the tower, speaking to his lieutenants. Calm, commanding, untouchable. Her pulse steadied. She could end it now. One breath, one squeeze. But something in her froze. Because as she centered him in her crosshairs, he looked up, directly at her. The distance was impossible, the concealment perfect, and yet he saw her, again. Slowly, deliberately, lifted his hand and gestured. A subtle wave, and the girl stepped forward, rifle in hand. A challenge, a duel, not between armies but between legacies. Whispered almost to herself, "He wants me to kill her." Blackwood tensed, "Then let me take the shot." "No," said firmly. Her eye stayed pressed to the scope. Through it, she saw the girl lower into prone, settle her cheek, steady her breathing, every motion identical to her own. Their eyes met across the distance. Not enemies, not strangers, reflections. The girl fired. The shot snapped past position, grazing stone, precise, deadly, a message. Exhaled, she could feel every part of herself pulling into the decision. Her past, her father's teachings, every life she had taken, every silence she had carried. She aimed not at the girl's chest, not at her head, at her rifle. The shot cracked. The weapon shattered in her hands, snapping her fight away. The girl flinched, eyes wide, stunned. His voice whispered into the comms, though no one else could hear the words, "You don't have to be him," but was already moving. His men surged, firing into the tree line. Chaos erupted. Bullets shredded bark, grenades thudded into soil. His team returned fire, the night alive with thunder. She shifted targets, cutting down mercenaries with precision, protecting her men, buying seconds at a time, but remained calm in the storm, barking orders, repositioning his fighters. And then he moved. Not hiding, not commanding from the rear, rifle in hand, eyes locked on her ridge. He was coming for her. Blackwood shouted over the gunfire, "Chief, he's—" "I know," she cut him off. For a moment the world narrowed, just the two of them, two ghosts stepping out of shadow. Raised his rifle, raised hers. The distance between them disappeared in silence. His shot cracked first. Bark exploded beside her head. She didn't flinch. She exhaled, fingers steady, pulling. Her bullet struck true, staggered, the force ripping through his chest. He fell to one knee, but his eyes never left hers. And then he smiled. Blood on his lips, rifle slipping from his grasp, he tilted his head in that same gesture of silence, a finger to his lips. And he fell. The firefight collapsed with him. Mercenaries broke, scattering into the jungle. The daughters, those who remained, dragged their wounded, eyes wide, shaken but alive. The tower still stood, but its heart was gone. Silence followed, heavy, absolute. Lowered her rifle, her hands trembling for the first time in years. Blackwood touched her shoulder, his voice raw. "It's over." She shook her head. "No, it's never over." Her eyes drifted to the girl, still alive, still watching her. Their eyes locked one final time, and in them saw not hatred, not vengeance, only confusion, a question. and gave her only answer, a small shake of the head. Not today, not like this. The girl turned, disappearing into the jungle with the others. A ghost set free or a ghost waiting to return. Didn't know. But she knew this. She couldn't kill her reflection. Extraction was quiet, too quiet. The helicopter thundered overhead, pulling them into the night. Blackwood sat across from her, sweat and dirt streaking his face, eyes still wide with the weight of what they'd done. Finally he spoke. "You saved her." Didn't answer. She stared out the open door, the jungle shrinking below, the horizon burning gold with dawn. Blackwood leaned closer. "Why?" Her eyes never left the horizon. "Because someone once saved me, and sometimes silence doesn't kill, it spares." He studied her, searching for more, but there was nothing else to say. The helicopter roared on. Back in weeks later, the official report read clean. Mission success, neutralized, Black Fang disrupted. But between the lines knew the truth. Was gone, but his shadow was. His daughters lived. And in quiet corners of her mind she felt them watching, waiting, a reminder that silence never truly ends, it only shifts. One evening, standing alone on the range, she closed her eyes and whispered her father's words. "Find the space between heartbeats, that's where the shot lives." But then she added her own, a truth carved from decades of scars. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The wind carried her words away, lost in silence. And Ghost of Last Valkyrie lowered her rifle. For now, the world was quiet.